On today's show, stars speak out against the vaccine on Media Day. We discuss the NBA's struggle to get fully vaccinated, plus how Russell Westbrook forced his way to the Lakers, Ben Simmons' future with the Sixers, and the latest injury concern with Zion Williamson. That's all coming up next here on a Tuesday edition of Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA, everybody. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Later in the show, how Russell Westbrook, along with LeBron James, forced his way out of Washington, Joel Embiid's comments on Ben Simmons, and a surprise appearance by David Letterman. But first, we turn to NBA Media Day, a day usually set aside for team photographs, cookie-cutter quotes, updates on increased muscle mass, but this year included more drama as a few high-profile players across the league made public their anti-vaccination stances, including Kyrie Irving, Andrew Wiggins, and in Washington, an unvaccinated Bradley Beal, who David told reporters, "I would ask the question to those who are getting vaccinated, why are you still getting COVID?" That quote made the rounds on social media, got a lot of comments on social media. David, what did you make of that comment from Bradley Beal?
Look, I hate to say it. I understand that perspective because especially amongst Blacks in the United States, there is a healthy distrust of having any kind of government agency tell you, inject this into your body. And of course, there are concerns and were concerns that were voiced by health organizations about whether or not there would be long-term effects of the vaccination and everything else for a player like Beal, who already experienced COVID and by his own accounts, didn't really get sick other than losing his sense of smell, which is in and of itself a symptom of COVID, a problem with COVID, that I understand why he's being so vocal about this. But as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar pointed out in a recent piece by Rolling Stone, they have a responsibility to everybody that follows the NBA, but also just their general community, as we all do, to get vaccinated, not just for our own sake, but for everyone else's. And yes, you can spread it, but the chances of doing so are mitigated completely. And so Bradley, unfortunately, is a part of the problem. He is one of those players that is widely misinformed about the benefits of getting the vaccine.
Yeah, and one of the things that the backlash against that is, you didn't get the vaccine, you didn't get all of that sick, but you were a lucky one, right? And you're
Right.
young, you're very fit, all of these things, you're relatively healthy compared to a lot of other people who could get sick and they're not as fit, they're not as healthy, they're not as young, and they would have much more severe symptoms, and in a lot of cases, die from this. And getting the vaccine, that doesn't necessarily.
He's got kids. Like, they can't get vaccinated. That's the
Right.
whole problem. Like, me as a father of a toddler, I understand my responsibilities to try to avoid it, getting into any kind of contact like that. But Bradley apparently doesn't feel the same way, and that's part of the problem.
He doesn't, and it's not a sentiment. That's a sentiment shared by other high-profile players. I mean, you had Kyrie Irving, maybe the most outspoken about all things that are kind of like this. He was not at Nets Media Day because he's not vaccinated, and he could be forced, unlike Bradley Beal, who could still play home games in Washington. Kyrie Irving might not be able to play any home games because of New York City's COVID-19 protocols. And when asked about this over a Zoom call, because of course he wasn't allowed in the building at Barclays Center, but he did do a Zoom call, Kyrie said that he plans to release more information at a later time because he doesn't trust the media and whatever it is that Kyrie is about. And when asked about this, when Kevin Durant was asked about Kyrie's stance, he said he expects to have the whole team together. Quote, at some point does not sound good to me if I'm a Nets fan, David. At some point could mean tomorrow. At some point could mean All-Star break. At some point could mean, hey, maybe he'll be back by the playoffs. What do you expect from Kyrie Irving? Because I'll tell you what I expect. I expect him to miss time because that's kind of the whole deal with Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it last year. Potentially for legitimate reasons, he felt like he needed to take time, step away from the game, and things of that sort. And I think we're going to see a lot of that this year from him too. I think his teammates kind of just understand that that's part and parcel of trying to deal with a personality like Kyrie's, is that he's going to do his own thing at some point, and then when he returns to action, he is one of the best basketball players in the world. And that's something you kind of have to learn to accept. It's just, there's a lot of jokes about Kyrie, and I understand that he often has been crucified as a player who often thinks of himself as the smartest guy in the room. But it's just, I'm so sick of seeing these anti-vax takes from him. Like, I get it. Like, I know he sometimes just likes poking the bear a little bit, poking media in particular when he says the earth is flat and things that sort, whether he believes it or not. It's like he's doing the community a disservice by putting them out there, because all it takes is one person who's easily influenced by player. And believe me, you should never be influenced by any player, right or wrong. And all it takes is for one guy to say, you know what, maybe Kyrie's right. He's not. He's way off base here.
Of all the players that we're talking about and going to talk about, Kyrie Irving is the only one with a signature shoe deal. And I point that only because he is highly influential. That's why Nike has agreed to make a shoe with him. It is a problem. I mean, there are people, I mean, you go to a pickup game now, you go to a pickup court out anywhere, and there are people wanting to be Steph. There are people wanting to be Kobe. There's people wanting to be Kyrie Irving too, and they're trying all the dribble moves and stuff like that. You tell me that they're not. I mean, they're absolutely influenced by what Kyrie Irving thinks, and people love this like anti-media kind of thing. People like that now. That's unfortunately where the media stands.
It's free thinking. That's how it's sold, right? It's packaged as, oh, I'm independent thinker. And it's like, no, yeah, I mean, maybe we could just share in the same right thought. And I know part of the problem is accepting what's right and what's wrong, but Jesus, I mean, this is just, it's going to continue to be a problem if players start speaking out against this. And
it's not a problem. It's not a problem for Milwaukee. It's not a problem for Miami. It's not a problem for Philadelphia, Atlanta, these teams that want to beat the Nets in the Eastern Conference. And that, to me, if I'm a Nets fan, look, you want your star players to stand for the right thing, but you also want your star players to be playing. And I just think we're getting to the point now where we look with Milwaukee coming off of that championship, and we're like, all right, well, now it's the Brooklyn Nets. They got injured in the playoffs. They'll have James Harden for a full season, all this. Kevin Durant's healthy. James Harden is healthy. Kyrie Irving is healthy for the most part right now. He's not vaccinated, but and so I suppose that could change at any moment. But this is not good for the Nets if they're trying to win a championship here. They need Kyrie Irving. Like, you don't, just because you have the other two guys doesn't mean that you're going to be ready to go, especially with how good Milwaukee is. Then there's Andrew Wiggins, also not vaccinated, also not really saying anything. He's saying that he's going to keep all of that private because it's, quote, a personal matter. Went on to say that basically, you know, he has a belief in what's right and what's wrong, and that he's going to continue doing what he believes in. He had a previous appeal to the NBA Players Association and the NBA that was rejected. You know, he wanted to, you know, have a religious exemption that was not accepted. And now he's kind of forced into a corner. And he admitted as much. He's like, he kind of has his back against the wall right now, but not really saying one way or the other what he's going to do. I think the Warriors have a problem right now with Andrew Wiggins, because earlier on Media Day, Steve Kerr, Bob Myers both asked about this. They said, oh no, we expect to have everybody who is healthy, meaning not Klay Thompson, James Wiseman, ready to go by the beginning of the season. I don't know with Andrew Wiggins. The San Francisco ordinance goes in place on October 13th, so he'll be available in this short term. But long term, if he's not vaccinated, he's not going to be able to play home games. It's that simple.
Yeah, and we're going to continue to get dogged by this throughout the rest of the season, right? I mean, I just want some kind of return to normalcy, not just in our lives as far as code is concerned, but just even covering basketball. Like the inability to cover media day in person because of vaccination rules and things of that sort. It's just, I'm sick of it. And for players like Andrew, like for him to finally take a stand on something after a long career of basically waffling in the middle, now here he is taking the wrong stance. I don't know. I'm really done with this whole thing. What was his mood like as he's answering these questions? Because
it was the most interesting media session he's ever had. I'll start there. But no, it was at first he was just normal Andrew Wiggins, just very low key, kind of mumbling into the microphone, glancing up from the table every so often. That's about it. And then after a while, he got a little frustrated with the media, I would say, and basically told them, like, look, it's none of your business. But
it is.
Andrew, and I'll give the Associated Press's Janie McCauley, I'll give her credit, said it kind of is, and we're giving you we're not asking you about this because we're curious. We're asking you about this because you're a public figure, and we're giving you a chance to voice your reasons for this. If you do indeed believe so strongly in having the right not to be vaccinated, then tell us. Like, this is your opportunity. And Andrew Wiggins said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep all of that personal. And I'm getting frustrated with players like Andrew Wiggins and Kyrie Irving who have just the wrong view of what the media is. I know that maybe it can be difficult to just, compartmentalize this person who you're in a room with, just talking one-on-one with, but we are writing this, we are putting this out there for public consumption because you are a public figure. And you don't get paid $27 million to play basketball. You get You get paid $27 million to play basketball on TV in the middle of car commercials and beer ads. That's what you get paid for. And that's what I would love to explain to people like Andrew Wiggins and Kyrie Irving. And by the way, have tried. And people like Jamie McCauley have tried. And they just don't see it that way. They're like, no, I'm really good at basketball. That's why I get paid this much. No, that's not why. That's why you're in this position. But and they have this idea that it's personal. It's not personal, man. Not when you're a public figure. Unfortunately, that's what comes to the territory. If you don't want the territory, leave the NBA. I mean, I don't mean to sound like get off my lawn guy, but that's kind of it.
Yeah, and how soon before we see something like that? Because I was just thinking about that right now, even as you're talking about this. Like, how soon before a major player or even a role player, anybody just says, you know what, I'm willing to walk away from the game.
Yeah.
I'm willing to walk away from the money, the accolades, and everything else, because this is my stance, my personal stance that I firmly believe in, and I'm not going to play basketball as a result. And I think
Kyrie Irving's kind of done a version of that. He'll just walk away from the game and be like, I'm done with this. And then like after a while, he'll be like, I changed my mind. I like the money. That money was pretty good. One other guy that I want to mention is Jonathan Isaac, not because he's the star at this level, even though he has star quality or potential, but had perhaps the strongest public comments on this, saying that he feels like unvaccinated players are being bullied into potentially getting vaccinated, being pressured by the NBA to get vaxxed. And he calls that pressure a, quote, injustice. I mean, by far the strongest stance by a player. And you see what's going on here with, hey, well, you got to sit in a different section of the bus or on the team plane, and you've got to wear a mask while the vaccinated players don't have to wear a mask. And you've got these other rules that these other vaccinated players don't have to abide to. And I think a normal person would be like, well, duh. But people like Jonathan Isaac feel like they're being bullied and they don't understand why. What did you take? What's your takeaway from Isaac's comments?
Well, he's an intelligent player. I'll be honest with you, even if this is just rooted in somewhat ignorance. And I'll preface this by saying also, like, I probably should have said this at the beginning. Neither of us are experts. We're all speaking our opinions here. I think we just have a concern for the general societal safety at large. And hearing Isaac's comments, I can see where a lot of players would draw parallels to segregation, being forced to sit in a particular bus, section of the bus, or being quarantined away from everybody. But that's the root of the situation here, is that there are health concerns, and your inability to get vaccinated greatly puts everybody else at risk. And that's where Jonathan is missing the point completely. And I know that for him, there are strongly rooted religious beliefs as well that are kind of driving him to this point, but he's wrong here. And I'm sick of seeing these players use limited experience, limited research to kind of draw these conclusions that seemingly fall from out of nowhere. Look, I know, again, I'm not an expert. I had concerns originally about the vaccine, but then my thought process is, well, you know what? If it can keep me safe, if it can keep my son safe, it can keep everybody around me safe, I'm willing to take that chance. A few months later, no problems. And I don't think that there are enough numbers showing that problems do exist from getting vaccines where these players have any legitimate concerns. It's widely disproved that the vaccine is the best and healthiest solution for it.
It is. And I wonder now, and you look at, comments from Andrew Wiggins and Kyrie Irving, and it's just like, where they're asked, where are you getting your information from? And I remember, Andrew Wiggins was asked, where are you getting information? He just, just everywhere. And I was like, well, what does that mean? Does everywhere mean Facebook? Because that's not good. Does everywhere, accurate, no. Or does everywhere mean the government? I don't know. Like, what does everywhere mean? It's just that's not a good answer. It should not be coming from everywhere. This is not the kind of thing that should be coming from everywhere. All right. We spoke about some of these instances, but more broadly, the NBA is hovering right around 90% from a vaccination rate. These are the big names right now that we're talking about. But with a 90% vaccination rate, it's gonna be more than 4 or 5 players that are unvaccinated. Do you think the NBA has a problem going into this season, David?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's going to be any kind of normalcy. They're losing ground here, and they recognize more than any other agency or any other league that they kind of set the tone. They set the tone last March when they were the first ones to kind of just put a stop on their season, entering into the expanded bubble and everything else. They've kind of shown exactly how to handle these things. They set the bar, and I think they just don't know how to handle this. There's a huge internal struggle between the players agency, between players and veterans that have heretofore had louder voices in the locker room. Now all of a sudden, all it takes is one player like a Wiggins or an Isaac to say, you know what, this is how I feel, and that kind of just sows the seeds of dissent. And you are going to start to see much more alienation, I think, amongst players, because you're going to start to see some people kind of just, holding others accountable and not getting along the way they were. I mean, you talk about chemistry as a whole being impacted, and I think that's what we're going to start to see here. And we saw it last year just with the frequent testing and everything else. Now this is a completely different aspect, COVID related, all the same, and yet people are going to be, I think players are going to struggle. The league is going to try to figure out how to juggle this. And I don't think that there's any easy answer other than just forcing players to do so. And then that brings about a significant amount of backlash.
Well, and the problem is the NBA has tried to make it a requirement to get vaccination, and the Players Association has pushed back very hardly on that. And it does not look like they're going to budge on that. And the easiest solution would be, hey, get the vaccination or you can't play. And there's going to be 10% of the league that just doesn't play this season. And that's it. Just like we've seen over the last couple of years in all sports, is that players are just sitting out full seasons, and that's what has to happen. But they can't get the Players Association on board with it, and until they do, I think it's going to take the Players Association's leadership to get this done, because the players are going to trust their own union more than
Kyrie is part of that Players Association leadership.
Well,
that's unbelievable. Yeah, he's one of the loudest voices in the room, and his is unfortunately one of dissension.
The Athletic had a really interesting article about the Russell Westbrook getting to Los Angeles. A lot of really interesting stuff in there. To me, the most interesting tidbit was details on LeBron James's cigar room. I want to talk about that here in a little bit. But first, David, tell the listeners about Rock Auto.
Well, it's been an organization that's been around for 2+ decades, a family-owned business. If you're looking for parts for your car, sometimes you could go to a traditional chain storefront. They start looking up parts in their computer. They start asking you questions. You feel embarrassed. Maybe you have no idea what you're talking about. Skip all that. No fuss, no muss. You just go to rockauto.com's easy to navigate website. A few clicks away, and you get the parts that you're looking for delivered directly and safely to your door. And the best part is that the same low prices are available to everybody. Again, a family-owned business that's been serving auto parts customers like you online for 20 years. Amazing. So if you're looking right now to get parts for your car or truck, just use rockauto.com, and when you're done, go to the section that says, how did you hear about us? And write the phrase locked on so they know we sent you. It's amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts you need for your car or truck. That's rockauto.com.
So according to The Athletic, Russell Westbrook convinced the Washington Wizards management to trade him to the Lakers when he caught wind that the Lakers were nearing a deal with the Sacramento Kings for Buddy Hield. Westbrook, who is a Southern California native, had been one of several players invited to LeBron's war room, which is the phrase used in this article, war room, in his LA mansion. This is a mansion that includes 8 bedrooms and most importantly, a wine cellar and a mahogany cigar lounge. So you could just see LeBron along with Anthony Davis and Jared Dudley just bringing players into this smoke-filled cigar lounge, swirling wine, and talking to them about, what can you do for us, right? And you just don't even see LeBron's face. You just see it's just hidden in a cloud of smoke or something like that. So Russell Westbrook was one of those players, as was DeMar DeRozan, apparently, and DeRozan later signed in Chicago. According to this Athletic report, LeBron and Anthony Davis valued Russell Westbrook's playmaking and believe that all three of them can make it work, with AD apparently agreeing to play more center this upcoming season. Given this latest intel, David, are you more confident in Westbrook's fit in LA?
No, but I do want more details on the war room. I'm just curious about this. Like a lot of, half jokingly, but everybody talks about LeBron running the league, and of course he's been somewhat quiet, I think, about the vaccination issue. So I wonder how he's going to play that. I think he could persuade a lot of people in the league and outside of it if he were a little bit more public. But anyway, as far as a war room, 100% he controls the lighting in that, right? Like he's got some remote control. Right. It just shines a spotlight, when he's asking you a question, so you feel the pressure much more intensely. As for Westbrook's fit, I think ideologically, he's always been a good fit there. Like he wants to win a championship. He's a competitor. He's a guy who understands what's necessary. He's played with superstars like KD and others before. I think it absolutely was a fine fit. It's just still a matter of him lacking efficiency. And I think that's just been the case with Russell Westbrook for years. We know he's going to compete. We know he's going to play hard. There's only one level to Russell Westbrook. It's not always a good one. And I think that's what's expected of him playing alongside LeBron James when they're obviously competing for a championship.
Yeah. I love that the cigar room is mahogany. I like cigars. I don't know. I enjoy a good cigar on a balcony or something like that. I don't know what that experience is like in a room of mahogany. I don't even know if I've ever sat in a room of mahogany. I'm not even sure what that exactly would be like.
You haven't been invited to the war room, I guess.
I got to. How close is the wine cellar to the cigar room? That's also a pretty interesting, because like, is it in walking distance? Can you, hey, once you're done with one bottle, because if there's 4 people in there, that's one glass of wine each. So you need to have easy access to these bottles of wine. How many bottles of wine are they going through in each of these meetings? And as the meeting goes on, like, do they become a little bit more agreeable as they drink more wine and smoke some more cigars? I don't know. That's very interesting to me. But as far as the fit in LA, the other more interesting thing, I guess the second most interesting thing to me in this article, is that Anthony Davis apparently agreed to say, you know what, I will play more center. Now, that is I'll believe it when I see it, because we've also heard this stuff from LeBron too about, I want to get rid of some of my playing duties. I want to delegate some of the playmaking stuff, so that I can play a little bit more off the ball. And then the season starts, and he's like, and then we want to play faster and all this stuff. And then the season starts, and they play deliberately, and the ball's in LeBron's hands all the time. So it's like with Anthony Davis playing more center. I'll believe it when I see it. But it is kind of more than ever needed for it to work, because there's not a version of this that works if LeBron is holding the ball the whole time. Anthony Davis is not spacing the floor because Dwight Howard or DeAndre Jordan are playing center, and Russell Westbrook is just standing in a corner being ignored by the defense. Like, that version just doesn't work. I don't care how good LeBron and Anthony Davis are, because the other two guys are Trevor Ariza and Wayne Ellington, or some assortment of players like that. Like, that's just ain't gonna work. So I wonder if it's actually going to work. In one respect, again, I'm skeptical. In the other respect, I think these guys are smart enough to know there isn't that leeway that maybe LeBron had in the past.
And why add 3 older centers to your roster if none of them are going to play? Like, you've got all these centers here. Yeah. Like, I don't understand what their role is for. Like, do they even have a role? Why add DeAndre Jordan as if he's some missing piece to your contention if he doesn't expect to play? I don't know. And then you've got Trevor Ariza as your starter, and having covered him last year in Miami, not a knock on Trevor, fine person and everything else, but I just don't know how reliable an option it is. You're not getting much offense out of him. You're getting defense in theory, but I don't know if that's necessarily your best starting lineup here. So it's an interesting question here. And the Lakers don't have a lot of wiggle room here. No. I mean, their goal is a title, as it always is with LeBron. And I think, you've got AD there, and you're hoping that he'll continue on this trend of being upfront about what his role is, but I don't see him sticking to it. I don't see LeBron sticking to playing off ball or anything like that,
or Frank Vogel. Yeah. Like, I mean, you look at that starting lineup. You mentioned Trevor Ariza. At this point, he's more reputationally a good defender than he actually is at this point of his career. Wayne Ellington has never been a good defender, and if you're going to start those two guys with Westbrook, who does not like to play defense, and LeBron James and Anthony Davis, then you're looking at. And look, I'll give LeBron credit last year. He did try really hard on defense, and the Lakers ended up being the #1 defense in the league last year, despite Anthony Davis missing half the season. But you're looking at that starting lineup is much different than a starting lineup that includes Alex Caruso and Contavious Caldwell-Pope, guys who are actually good defenders. That starting lineup has only 2 guys who I trust to be a good defender on a night in, night out basis. That's Anthony Davis and LeBron James. And that's 3 other places where teams can attack. Russell Westbrook has all the talent in the world. He can be a good defender. We'll see if that's part of their war room agreement, is that he's locked in. Again,
how many bottles of wine before he starts agreeing to play defense? I wonder.
Yeah, just keep feeding him wine. The other interesting part before we move on from this is, like, we've known LeBron has been like the shadow GM for years and years. Basically, he left Miami in order to become a shadow GM in Cleveland and then later in Los Angeles. But this is kind of the first article that come out and just kind of laid it all out there, right? Like, I don't remember reading anything that this was this detailed and this in depth about this is how LeBron James constructed the team this year, not only from Russell Westbrook, but calling Carmelo Anthony and being like, it's time, in the most dramatic way possible, and then hanging up the phone. That's, again, I imagine him doing it in the war room, just like calling Anthony Davis from like a landline, or calling Carmelo Anthony from a landline, smoking a cigar in one hand and just be like, it's time. And then like Carmelo being like, who is this? And then him just like hanging up the phone. But this is like the most just blatant story ever about LeBron being the GM, right?
Right. Yeah. Can we just dispel with the notion of tampering and everything else? Like, I mean, as Miami and Chicago await a judgment from the league as to whether or not they tampered to acquire Kyle Lowry and or Lonzo Ball, it's just like, here we have this war room with his wine and cigar and this incredibly elaborate lighting and everything else. And LeBron saying, no, I want you don't want you. Come to my team. We'll figure it out somehow. And like, regardless of whether or not these teams have general managers that can actually arrange for these deals or not, it's just a matter of whether or not LeBron wants him on this team. So I do find that interesting. I'm also okay with it because it's perfectly reasonable for players to want to decide where they want to play, even if it kind of forces their teams into a sticky situation where they have to force these trades or accept a deal with Montrezl Harrell and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Kyle Kuzma in exchange for Russell Westbrook, which I still think is a very good deal for Washington. But I'm just curious. I think the general public will say, well, LeBron's been running the league for years anyway. Now we get actual evidence of that.
Right.
That's a little strange. And I wonder how the league handles that. I don't think they can react too publicly. They've got enough on their hands right now. So I don't think they can challenge LeBron, knowing that he can sway a lot of favor if he, is positive and focuses on the good things that the league has to offer this year.
That's right. Ben Simmons wasn't at Sixers Media Day. Why the organization isn't ready to give up on him just yet, plus why I'm concerned about Zion Williamson's latest injury. But first, David, tell listeners about Sleeper.
Well, in 2018, the fantasy sports expert over at Sleeper realized that fantasy basketball was broken. Games were being won and lost based on whose players had more scheduled games that week. It made no sense. It required very little strategy. So in 2020, Sleeper released a brand new way of playing fantasy basketball. It's called Game Pick, and it's only available on Sleeper and Game Pick. Owners pick a single game per week for each starter count towards their team's total score, ensuring an even number of games being played between opponents. The days of losing because your opponent's players simply had more scheduled games to play in that week are over. Whether you prefer a redraft, a keeper, or dynasty, Game Picks has you covered. Sleeper cracked the fantasy basketball code. If you play fantasy football, if you prefer building out a weekly strategy versus daily busy work, you're going to love Game Picks. Download the Sleeper app and start a league with your friends today. You will not be disappointed. And believe me, you want to get started with that now because we're back and better than ever. All eyes are on the gridiron as teams are back to start another football season, another exciting weekend of NFL action and college football. As always, BetOnline, your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season with a new updated site and interface. They use even more odds, props, and contests. BetOnline.ag continues to be your number one source for everything football. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 100% welcome bonus. That's double your initial deposit just for signing up. Don't forget to use the promo code NFL100 from football, basketball, boxing, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers for the 2021 season. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Your online sportsbook experts, and don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON.
As expected, Ben Simmons wasn't present at Sixers Media Day on Monday, and his absence was the subject of plenty of discussion. Asked about Ben Simmons, who has requested a trade from the Sixers, in case you're just catching up here, Joel Embiid, his teammate, said, quote, "Of course we want him back. He's a big piece of what we've been building this past few years." Embiid also added, "I really hope he changes his mind." That sentiment was echoed by Daryl Morey, who said that he hopes to reconcile with Simmons, also mentioning the situation between the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers as an example of, hey, we can mend fences here. That's evidence that teams and player can mend fences. David, do you think that this can be fixed by the start of the season?
Not. Absolutely not. I found it to be so completely laughable and disingenuous when the whole city of Philadelphia, when practically the whole team, like they're saying publicly, what are they going to say? They don't want to make themselves look any worse. And I hate that we've gotten to the point now where the narrative has forced me to defend Ben Simmons of all people, who I think a lot of, smart-minded people have criticized, and probably rightfully so for a number of reasons. There's not to say that Ben has been a perfect basketball player by any stretch of the imagination. He cost the team the playoffs. I think he struggled at times throughout his career, but he's also a very solid player, a very good defender, and perhaps even on a Hall of Fame track if he continues developing. At the same time, you've got his teammates who threw him under the bus. You had a coach who publicly criticized him. Maybe that's somewhat interpretive, but at the same time, I think he didn't defend him, which is something you necessarily want from a player. Like, you just want to have a healthy work environment. Ben doesn't feel like he has it in Los Angeles. He said it. He already told his teammates allegedly, "Don't bother coming to visit me. I don't want to talk to you guys." Like, this is really, really dramatic, but at the same time, I don't think he wants to get along with these guys anymore. And sometimes you just need a change of scenery, and I think he'll find it. And for him or his agent to say he just wants to play anywhere, I mean, does that include teams like Sacramento? Does that include teams like Cleveland or anywhere else that are struggling and obviously rebuilding? I'm curious.
No, it does not.
Probably not. Probably not. But at the same time, I know it does not include Philadelphia. He does not want to be there. And I think it's just that bridge is burned. Uh, I would have actually preferred, I think, if guys like Embiid and Tobias and others had just said, no, look, he wants to move on. More power to him. We're done. Rather than just throwing it out there and saying, no, we totally want him back, even though he obviously sucks. And we all know he needs to work on his jumper and everything else. Like Embiid also mentioned that too. It's like, you've seen the videos. You know what he needs to work on. It's like, all right, you're not helping. Thanks a lot, Joel.
It's one thing for Ben Simmons to be in a disagreement with the front office and the coaching. Like, that's the difference between his situation and the Aaron Rodgers situation. Aaron Rodgers was really upset with the general manager, with the head coach in some respects, but was never upset with his teammates. And that's the difference with Ben Simmons is he's upset with Daryl Morey. He's upset with Doc Rivers for all the things, like not defending him, trying to trade him, all this stuff. And because like Daryl Morey's like, hey, like he asked to be traded during the draft combine in Chicago. It's like, well, you were trying to trade him at the beginning of last season for James Harden. So who really like blinked first here? But he's also upset with his teammates who also, like Joel Embiid, have kind of thrown him under the bus and not really defended him so much after that Atlanta Hawks series. And I think he feels betrayed by them. And that's the reason why they're like, hey, we'll fly to LA and or wherever it was and mend fences. And he's like, no, you know what? I'm done with these guys.
Yeah.
I don't know how you come back from that. Again, you could usually in this situation, again, with Aaron Rodgers, you say, all right, Aaron Rodgers went back to the Packers, said, I'm doing this for my teammates. I'm doing it for the fans. But the fans have been anti-Ben Simmons they've been trying to trade Ben Simmons for years now, longer than Philadelphia has been. And he's not getting along with his teammates. So what is the reason for Ben Simmons to return to Philly and make everything hunky-dory? Like, there isn't one that I see, at least. So
no, yeah, I can't imagine this being a salvageable relationship. No. Like, I mean, you have local area newscasters comparing you to a floating waste trash can, down a flooded area there. I just, what is that quote about, Ben Simmons trying to rush to get out of town as they show like a trash can being floated away outside of a flooded area there in Philadelphia. That's great. Irreparable. Yeah, not great. And I can't see him ever playing there again. I just can't imagine that. This would probably be akin to like LeBron coming back to Cleveland in 2010 when he first joined Miami. I can't, the level of hatred there. And look, Philadelphia, the city that, somewhat notoriously booed Santa Claus and threw things at Santa Claus. I mean, Ben Simmons is not going to make it out of the city of brotherly love in one piece. I'll tell you that much.
Pelicans president of basketball operations, David Griffin, revealed that Zion Williamson underwent surgery on his right foot right after Summer League. Zion was practicing with the Pelicans in Las Vegas, injured his right foot there, underwent surgery shortly after. The Pelicans do expect that Zion will be ready for the start of the regular season. He will probably miss training camp in the preseason. How big of a concern should this be for New Orleans?
Huge. I mean, I saw Pelicans guys saying, "Oh boy, here we go again." It always seems like he's always going to have these nagging injuries. He looked a little hefty, and I hate, media day. Part of it is analyzing these players' bodies and muscle watch and everything else. But you look at Zion, and he does look a little bit larger than I last remembered him, and it looks like he has not done a lot to lose weight and to get into kind of conditioning shape that he probably needs to be for the rest of his career, and especially now if he's got a foot injury too, that's going to be impacting him throughout the rest of the season. And those kinds of things don't get better. You just add more pressure to it. You're going to have to deal with that for a number of years now. So I would be legitimately concerned because he is your franchise player. You didn't win the offseason. You struck out at a number of deals. You couldn't bring in a guy like Kyle Lowry or somebody else. Now all of a sudden you're kind of you're forced to build around Zion. And if he's not healthy and he's not in shape, then what are you building on? And I have no idea how the Pelicans move forward from this with any kind of positivity, because I was curious to see what they were going to be able to do this regular season. Now it's just kind of more like watching a train wreck and seeing what happens next.
It sucks. I mean, this flatly sucks. I mean, I remember talking to you, I think it was last week, about Zion and just how, at Duke, he was a highlight machine, a highlight factory. Right. And in New Orleans, it hasn't been without great moments. And he was one of the best players in the league to finish last season when he got healthy. But it's just been time and time again, these lower body injuries. And like those injuries date back to Duke. And I would be hugely concerned if I'm a New Orleans Pelicans fan. And I've seen some of the reasoning being like, oh, well, they didn't even announce the surgery when it happened, so it must have not been a big deal. I have the opposite reaction. I'm like, they didn't announce the surgery because they knew they didn't announce the surgery because they knew what the reaction would be, because it is such a big deal, because it is their star player, it is the franchise player that they are building everything around. And if you get rid of Zion Williamson, then I don't know what you're building around. Like, Brandon Ingram's fine. You're not building around him. I have a lot of concerns for the Pelicans. I have a lot of concerns for Zion because he had so much promise. He was a blue chip prospect, a Tim Duncan level player, picked at number 1. You knew exactly how his career was going to end up if he stayed healthy. The problem is he hasn't. All right. In lighter news, David Letterman showed up at the Brooklyn Nets Media Day. And I will say this, probably the most interesting person at Brooklyn Nets Media Day. I am not interested in at all what those star players have to say because they are notoriously bad quotes. But David Letterman, first of all, asked Kevin Durant why they call him KD.
So I saw a lot of different perspectives on this. I think the negative one is obviously like it makes a mockery of media day, which is in and of itself a mockery, as I've said many times. Every 30 teams all think they're going to make the playoffs and win a championship, and they're always on media day. Rarely the case. And so, for Dave to be out there and kind of make light of a situation, it was funny. I thought his comments were funny. I've always liked Letterman. I like his acerbic type of humor, but also I saw the different perspective where they kind of trotted him out there to kind of deflect from some of the negativity that Kyrie has rightfully brought on himself and the franchise. And if that's the case, then that kind of feels a little bit covert.
I don't see David Letterman at this point of his career being somebody who gets trotted out anywhere. I would imagine that this is something that he's doing for his Netflix show or just for publicity in general. I don't think Letterman's not a guy that's getting trotted out somewhere. But
that's fair. I can see that too.
And so I think he was just making a mockery out of media day. Like, if that's the criticism, I think that's exactly what he was doing. Like, hey, this is stupid. And I think that people like you and I who cover this stuff know it's stupid. Yeah. And I do appreciate David Letterman just going out there. I like the Kevin Durant question, like why they call you KD, and then Kevin Durant's response.
The best one, the best
one was how much percent are you giving? That was the best one. Absolutely.
And he said 110%. He's like, 110. Okay. Wow, that's
very
impressive.
good.
Yeah, that's very good. That's the right answer there.
Glad to hear. Kevin Durant is so dry, and I think I was a little unfair to Kevin Durant just now when I said all these guys are boring quotes. Kevin Durant 80% of the time is an awful quote. 20% of the time he's an amazing. 20% of the time he's a very good quote when he's in the mood. I would have thought that a summer with not dealing with media, he would have came to media day kind of in one of his better moods. Turns out that wasn't the case, and he didn't like he clearly did not like the David Letterman thing.
I thought he was okay with it. With it. Yeah, I thought at first he was like, "What is this real?" Then he realizes Dave Letterman, and I mean, I don't even think Kevin Durant really knows who David Letterman is.
Well, not with that beard.
He does look a little different than when he was hosting his show, but
yeah,
I don't know if KD knows who he is. Maybe he kind of just was clued in and later on said, "Look, guys, we've got David Letterman here in the audience. He's going to ask you some stupid questions. Just kind of roll with it." And if that's the case, maybe KD kind of played it off. It was interesting to see the back and forth there, and I think he gave the right typical answer of 110% too. So it was funny to see that interaction.
There was a little bit, I think you're right. There was a little bit of jest. He enjoyed it a little bit. And then after like the third or fourth David Letterman question, he was like, all right, that's enough. Speaking of that's enough, I think that's enough for us today, David. That'll do it for us. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On NBA wherever you get your podcast. You can find David and I here next Tuesday. In the meantime, you can find David over at Locked On Heat. You can find me over at Locked On Warriors. But that's it. Thanks for subscribing on YouTube, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And we'll catch you next time.
Excellent segue, by the way.